Welcome to this explainer. Have you ever noticed something kind of weird about election season? For a few short weeks, it feels like everything is about to change, right? We hear these massive, ironclad guarantees about world-class infrastructure, totally free services, and booming incomes. But then, the elections end, and we're left dealing with that universal, annoying frustration of broken political promises. So today, we're going to dive right into this phenomenon and unpack the massive, hidden systems operating behind the scenes of literally every democracy. Because when things inevitably fall flat, when those grand guarantees about millions of jobs and lower taxes just vanish into thin air, we all tend to ask the exact same question. Are politicians just straight up lying to us? Or is there some much bigger, way more complicated system at work here that makes fulfilling those promises almost impossible? Look, there is this massive, undeniable tension between the lofty campaign rhetoric we always hear, the free electricity, the millions of jobs, and the really disappointing reality where those exact initiatives get delayed, watered down, or just completely forgotten. But the truth behind why this happens, it's actually far more complicated than most of us realize. So here's our agenda for today. We'll hit 1, the campaign promise trap, 2, executing in a democracy, 3, the true cost of promises, 4, the expectation gap, and finally 5, evaluating future political promises. Let's get right into it. All right, part 1, the campaign promise trap, or the business of winning elections. To really understand this trap, we first got to step into the shoes of a politician. Imagine you only have a few short weeks to capture the attention of millions of voters. Picture a candidate standing at a podium giving this pitch. We will gradually improve government efficiency over the next 10 years. Well, it's honest, it's totally realistic, but guess what? Absolutely nobody would pay attention to that. And that is a massive problem, because politics, it completely runs on attention. Now, what if instead they say, we will create 20 million jobs? Boom. Instantly, people are listening. The bigger the promise, the bigger the headlines, and obviously, the more votes you can potentially win. Politicians are structurally rewarded for making these massive, headline-grabbing promises today. But the dangerous incentive here is that they're going to be judged on delivering them years later, usually when the circumstances have completely changed. Moving on to part 2. Executing in a democracy, which is honestly an administrative nightmare. See, once the election is actually won, that whole illusion of absolute power just shatters right against reality. Take India, for example. We are talking about 1.4 billion people, more than 700 districts, thousands of towns, and hundreds of thousands of individual villages, spanning all sorts of different languages and economic realities. Simply managing a country of this incredible scale is quite literally one of the most complex administrative challenges on the face of the earth. So a shiny new project announced in Delhi might take years just to reach a remote village. The gauntlet they have to run is brutal. You've got land acquisition issues, endless legal disputes in courts, severe funding shortages, and crazy bureaucratic delays. A single promised sentence practically requires thousands of distinct decisions to actually become a reality. Plus, politicians usually can't act alone, right? They depend on coalition partners, state governments, and courts, each with their own totally conflicting interests. Which brings us to part 3, the true cost of promises, or the money problem. Okay, so there is this ultimate freebie trap in politics. Obviously, governments do not have unlimited money, but facing elections every few years, politicians are heavily incentivized to offer short-term relief. Think cash transfers or free electricity. Why? Because voters feel those benefits immediately. But these seriously strain state finances, and they're ultimately paid for by taxpayers or through future borrowing. On the flip side, you have long-term, economically sustainable infrastructure, like building roads or metro networks. But those, they might take 10 years to become visible, way past the next election cycle. Furthermore, reality changes incredibly fast. A government might enter office in year 1 projecting really strong economic growth. But by year 2 or 3, a global crisis, an oil shock, or maybe a massive pandemic hits. Suddenly, government revenues tank and priorities are forcefully changed. A promise that looked perfectly affordable right before the election suddenly becomes completely impossible afterward because enormous resources have to be redirected just to keep the country afloat. All right, part 4, the expectation gap. Basically, what do promises actually mean? When projects inevitably get delayed or scaled back, we smack right into the expectation gap. Think about it. When a politician promises jobs, what exactly does that mean? Expectations span wildly across getting a government role, maybe private sector growth, startup opportunities, or just basic skill development. It means entirely different things to different people. Because of this, disappointment is practically guaranteed. Often, the gap between what a voter expected and what actually gets delivered feels way larger than the actual gap between the promise and the implementation. However, we do need to remain objective here. Are all political promises bad? No, not necessarily. Road infrastructure, the massive success of digital payments like UPI, widespread electricity access, and direct benefit transfers, all of these began as simple political promises that eventually became a reality and successfully transformed the country. So the issue isn't the promises themselves. The real issue is whether those promises are realistic, financially sustainable, and actually backed by a highly clear execution plan. And that brings us to our final section, Part 5, Evaluating Future Political Promises and Empowering the Voter. This is where we shift the responsibility back to us, the voters. Before you buy into the next grand campaign speech, you really need to walk through a critical checklist. Ask yourself, how much is this actually going to cost? Who's eventually paying for it? Is it us through taxes right now, or our kids through future debt? How exactly will it be implemented across such a massive administrative landscape? How long will it take? And hey, has something similar ever actually succeeded somewhere else? The more informed we become as voters, the harder it is for unrealistic promises to succeed. Ultimately, governing a massive democracy just isn't as simple as making an energetic speech. Some politicians definitely overpromise. Some genuinely underestimate those systemic hurdles we talked about. And some just get trapped between their ambition and harsh economic reality. But execution, that's where the real challenge lies. Holding our leaders accountable really begins with having a rational, systemic understanding of how this machine actually works. As we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with this thought to ponder. Based on all these administrative hurdles, the whole freebie trap, and that massive expectation gap, what do you think is the biggest political promise in India that never actually gets fulfilled? Keep asking those difficult questions, and we'll see you next time.